Oh, and there's people coming in, which is great. So hello. Hello to everyone who's already joining us. We will get started just after 12 UK time. So welcome and good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome everyone. We'll just give it another minute or two because we're just expecting a few more people to sign on. So thank you all for being so prompt and for being here at the start time. So give it another minute or so and then we'll get going. And if you could just let me know via the chat function that you can sort of hear and see us and that you can see the screen as well, please. That would be very, very helpful because it all looks good at my end, but it's more important that it looks good at your end as well, because obviously we're here to exchange information. Perfect, thank you. Thanks everyone who's putting in the chat. That's really, really helpful. It's always better to double check rather than, I guess, talking to the internet void. Brilliant, that's good, that's good. Thank you so much for confirming. Right, it's 12:01, Shazney, so do you think we should get going? Perfect, so.
I think we
good.
should.
Wonderful, yeah, let's keep it to time. So hello everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. So my name's Monica Mwanje, I'm Managing Director of Creative Solutions, and I'm just really pleased that you're joining us for today's webinar about creating a mentally healthy work environment during uncertain times. So that's the welcome part of the agenda. I'll then run through some housekeeping in terms of how we're going to run things here on Zoom. I'll then effectively then hand over to Shazney because she's the real reason you're here, so we can hear her expertise, and we'll have some discussion throughout her presentation, and there's time for Q&A, and then we'll wrap up and close. So housekeeping wise, if you look within your Zoom screen, that there is a Q&A function, so you can submit your questions via that. If you wish to actually speak and ask your question directly to Shazney, you can use the raise hand feature if you are comfortable and submit your question via that route. Or if maybe, and please note in the Q&A function, you can submit your question anonymously as well. So I can just read it out for you. And, you know, if there's something that you really, really want to ask. Shazney is happy to take questions throughout the session, and we are going to run some polls, and again, they're all anonymous, and just only respond if you feel comfortable doing so. There's really no pressure for you to respond. Okay, so our guest speaker today is Shazney Spence, who is Managing Director of Equanimity, and she's just probably one of the most qualified people I know to sort of present on this topic. She's a mental health advocate, she's a corporate coach and consultant, and you know, when I was thinking about particularly sort of mental health in the workplace and well-being, just with everything that's going on in the world at the moment, she was the first person I thought of who could maybe come, share some expertise and just help have this conversation. And I do really want it to be a conversation because I think it's just so important we talk about this and that we look after our mental well-being, and that we just don't feel alone in all of this, because I don't know about some of you watching today, but there's days where I'm just like, I don't even think I've got the words, I guess, to fully express it, but I'm sure Shazney's going to help out with some of the language and some of the ways in which we can connect with some of the ways we're feeling, and to know that it is acceptable and it is part of life, and how we can better look after ourselves, really. So that is enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Shazni, and yeah, over to you, Shazni, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. Welcome to everyone who is joining us live on this webinar, and to those of you who will catch the replay. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege to be here. So thank you, Monica, for inviting me. I am Shazni Spence, and I am the MD of a company called Equanimity Lifestyle and Success Coaching. And I'm so passionate about my brand and what I offer, and I'll explain a little bit more about my story and why I'm here today to talk to you about this subject, this all-important subject. So for me, equanimity is all about mental and emotional stability and balance, and that's what I really help my clients, whether they're corporate businesses or one-to-one individuals, to attain. I am a mindset coach. I'm also a mental health advocate, as Monica expressed. I'm a facilitator and public speaker. And I'm very passionate about helping individuals and organizations really look at this topic of mental health. Now, I've had lived experience of mental ill health. I've had anxiety, depression, postnatal depression. And in a former life, when I was in the corporate world, before I was the MD of Equanimity, I had the privilege of being the mental health lead for Accenture, the UK division of that, and leading over 12,000 people in their initiatives around mental health, really encouraging the conversation about mental well-being. And I'm so privileged to today to still have that conversation with people, to help managers to engage with their staff on the topic of mental health. I host confidential calls with employees around their mental health on a weekly basis. And those are employees from MD level to junior analyst level. We have these confidential non-clinical conversations, because I offer non-clinical support, around how they're feeling. And what I then do is signpost them to the clinical areas of support, for example, the EAP or employee assistance programs, or their GPs, mental health allies. So it's my purpose and it's my passion to empower people to be honest about their mental well-being, to be honest about what they want out of life, but really to help them to contribute without barriers, especially in the corporate space, or if they're in their own business. You know, some of you on this call, I don't know your background, but you might be leaders in organizations, you might be lone directors of your own business like myself, you might be a HR person. Whatever the situation or wherever you're at, I know that this will resonate with you. We're in uncertain times, and we're really discussing that today, how to really create a mentally healthy workplace environment in view of the uncertain times that we're in. The onus really is on managers and leaders in organizations to create those healthy workplaces. But equally, as individuals, we have to make sure that we know the signs and are aware of our own mental well-being. So my intention for you is that today you really look at yourself and see where you're at. As I said, my whole ethos around my business is to help you attain a state of mental, emotional stability and balance. And the ethos to my company, or the strapline, is aligned intentional living. So I want you to set an intention for this session today. What do you want to get out of it? I'm a big one on intentions. I believe that when you set an intention and take actions that are in alignment with that intention, you can have a really successful life. So, Monica, if you could go over to the next slide, please, we can dive in. But before we do that, I want to just offer a mental health warning. So I do this on every single webinar that I share, everything that I talk about, if I do a public talk on mental health. The subject of mental health is a tricky one. It's a sensitive one, and it can be particularly triggering. So if throughout the course of this webinar today, you feel particularly triggered by anything, just take a few moments to draw away, go and get a drink of water. You might feel upset, and that's okay, but just trust and know that you can be honest about how you're feeling. Seek support speak to a trusted friend, or if you are in a corporate organisation, possibly still working from home, but reach out to trusted people, your employee assistance programme, mental health allies, or mental health first aiders. So I just wanted to kind of start by saying that. So this is what we're going to talk about today. This is my objective. When Monica asked me to prepare some content on this, I really wanted to help all of you who are watching this to get a greater level of awareness and acceptance and action. So I really kind of have that methodology throughout all of my coaching, awareness, acceptance, and action. Understanding where you're at with regard to your own mental well-being, how the organisation that you work or represent is, and then to take some action, because we are in uncertain times. So that's the objective. In terms of what we're going to cover, we're going to look at the effects of the pandemic on mental health, because obviously, let's face it, these uncertain times have really had an impact, not only physically on us, but also mentally. We're going to look at low mood and how we can recognise that. Also, how we can recognise depression, because there's a difference. Also, there are some steps that leaders particularly can take in order to promote workplace wellness. As I mentioned before, if you are a leader, you have a duty of care to provide an environment where your staff know that this conversation around mental health is okay, that they feel supported, that they are really best placed to be authentic and to bring their full selves to work. So we're going to look at that. We're also going to look at some routines and habits that we can incorporate into our daily life to really help us to support our mental well-being, our emotional stability and balance. We're going to touch on mindset, because that's kind of my forte. And we're going to really look at how during uncertain times we can shift that narrative from negative self-talk to a more positive self-talk. And then also we're going to cover where we can find some help and support. So you may be aware that this Saturday, the 10th of October, is World Mental Health Day. And it's the same day every single year, 10/10. And this year, the theme is mental health for all. So it's really important that we recognise that we all have a responsibility. We all have a part to play in this conversation about mental well-being. So, Monica, perhaps you could put the poll up. We'd like to invite you to take part in this poll. Hopefully you can all see it. So the poll says, do you feel that your mental health has been adversely affected as a result of the pandemic? And the options are yes, slightly, significantly, or no. Okay, can you see when the answers are all in, Monica? Awesome. Okay, so perhaps we can move on to the next slide. Just move that out of the way. Fabulous. So, as I said, this is the first thing on our agenda. We're really going to look at the effects of the pandemic on health. As I mentioned before, as leaders, we have a responsibility, if that is your role, to make sure that we're looking out for people. So during COVID-19, there's been so much that's gone on. There's been heightened uncertainty. The World Health Organization said that this is a crisis, and it's not only a physical crisis, but definitely a crisis in terms of mental well-being, because people have been worried, they've been having this feeling of increased level of stress. 1 in 6 people suffer from anxiety as it is, or depression. So those numbers have obviously become more prominent and more prevalent. So as we look at this slide, think about ways in which this has possibly affected you. Have you felt concern around finances, especially if you have been a lone worker or an MD of your own company or a sole trader? Has business dropped off for you? Or if you have been placed on furlough, we know we're coming to the end of the furlough honeymoon period. This has created anxiety and worry, not only for yourself, but that of others as well. And obviously, because of COVID-19, a lot of people have lost their lives. So this has created health anxiety for people, worrying about not only themselves, but their family. I've done a number of webinars on remote working and how that's affected people in terms of, having a more sedentary lifestyle, perhaps resorting to eating more, exercising less. So I don't know how you feel about this. I mean, have you noticed during the pandemic the effect of the lack of micro lifts? So as you know, as human beings, we love ritual. We love to go and get our morning coffee. We love to interact with people, especially at the beginning of the year when we were absolutely all on physical lockdown. We would have experienced a real reduction in these micro lifts, which has really led to a huge amount of despondency. So it's really important to kind of build those back in. I know we're not in the same level as lockdown as we have been, but it's building in those micro lifts, those little lifts of energy throughout the day. And as it says on here, there might be feelings of boredom and isolation. And a lot of my clients who I speak to live alone. So they might necessarily not have physical touch or physical contact with other people. And that can lead to a lot of unhealthy behaviours, and feeling quite low, which we'll talk about in a little while. Something else I've seen with a lot of my clients as well is sleep patterns being disrupted. Obviously, if they're not going into the workplace, perhaps sleeping in or working in their pajamas, not really showing up with the mindset of being in that corporate space. And that has an effect on your mental well-being as well. We've watched as the pandemic has progressed, and I've observed this, a change in people's attitudes, because at first there was a lot of shock. It's almost like the stages of grief, isn't it? A lot of shock, disbelief, we're on lockdown, this is happening, lots of people are losing their life. And then people were quite resistant to the lockdown of being isolated, but then people got quite used to that, thinking, well, actually, this is the way it is right now. And then what happened was when the government said, right, you can go back to work, there was a lot of re-entry anxiety, people fearful about going back into office spaces, being amongst people. So where are you at? Where are you currently feeling? And again, there's no judgment here. I don't want you to look at this through the eyes of judgment, but just through awareness, so that you can really recognize what your current reality is, or that of your teams or people around you, so that then you can take some action. Remember the steps: awareness, acceptance, and action. Another thing people have found as well has been there's been a lack of work-life balance. So if you're working from home every single day and have not been used to that, there isn't really that demarcation between the end of the working day and the start of the working day. You're working at home, you're eating at home, you're sleeping at home. So this has had a really disruptive effect. The pandemic has been the biggest situational change that we have experienced in our lifetime. So I don't know whether there are any points in the chat window at this point, Monica, any feelings of people relating to this or recognizing how these things have affected them. I'll pause there if anyone wants to mention anything or state whether anything resonates with them. If not, we'll move on.
I can definitely say that some of this resonates with me. I think particularly around some of the micro lifts, because even though I might primarily work from home, I think I hadn't necessarily realised just how much I was maybe nipping out somewhere to meet someone for coffee, for example, and all those other little interactions that happen outside of my primary workspace. And then it was the effect of all of that. And then I think I've also had some concerns for friends or colleagues I work with who do live alone, and just wanting to make sure people are okay through all of this. And I think the sleep patterns, speaking to a few different people, sleep patterns is one that resonated as well, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you are not sleeping well, this is going to have an impact on your productivity. So, especially as I mentioned, if people are leaders and managers within organizations, it's being cognizant of all of these impacts so that you can monitor your staff, not to micromanage them, but just to be aware and to make sure you've got the resources to help people. There are apps such as Sleepio that help you track your sleep, really helping people to know they can talk about these things that are affecting them. Because if people the company's biggest asset is its human capital, the people. So if the people feel that they can't actually say to their boss, you know what, I'm not sleeping, I'm worried, I'm feeling low, then the managers can't do anything about it. But what's important is that the managers create that healthy environment to allow there to be no stigma around talking about these things. So thank you for that, Monica. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So this is a big one. This is the next two slides. We're really going to look at how we can recognize any changes in your own behaviors and the behaviors of others. And this one's focusing on low mood. So it's completely natural to feel worried around the present situation with COVID-19. The rules are changing moment by moment by moment. And sometimes in those uncertain times, it can really create a feeling of uncertainty and just unease. So if you're worried, don't berate yourself for that. You know, feeling low is common after a distressing event or a distressing situational change. So these are some things that you might be feeling, but what I want you to encourage you to do is to be really honest and open about how you're feeling. There is no shame in vulnerability. In fact, there is power in it. Because then when you're in that state of awareness, you can do something about it. So you might be feeling low mood. Now, low mood is something that lasts just fleetingly. It doesn't last forever. It's something that just happens occasionally or may happen just for a week or so. You might not be feeling yourself. You might feel particularly emotional if you're not, you know, generally that's not your modus operandi. You might be feeling more so. You might feel more tired. We've touched on sleep already. You might feel more emotional, or, you know, it might be that you're not interested in things that previously used to bring you joy. You might struggle to cope with everyday life. Now, this might be something that is a bit of a shock for you because previously you might be seen to have been quite a vibrant person. But because of the uncertainty, you might feel just unable to kind of cope with things. Are you feeling a brain fog? Do you feel like you've got things to do in terms of tasks, but you just haven't got the energy or the clarity to get them done? Similarly, losing interest in your work. Now, this is a big one. And again, there's no judgment here, but this is a point of awareness. You might be using food or alcohol or extreme exercise as a way to cope. Not wanting to be around other people and feeling burnt out. So these are some things that you might be feeling. Low mood. It's important, as I say, to mention the distinction between low mood and depression, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Low mood visits you periodically, and it may come and it may go. You may feel fine the next day. The main thing I'd say here is to honor how you're feeling. Be aware of it. Share. Talk to someone who you feel you can trust, whether that be a mental health ally or ambassador in your organization, a trusted friend, or your EAP, or even your coach or counselor or GP. So Monica, if you can go over to the next slide, please. We're going to now look at how to recognize depression in yourself or others. So as I mentioned before, depression is a bit longer, you know, it's a bit more intense. It lasts for more than 2 weeks. It's a persistent low mood, if you will. And it's more severe. It's more severe than low mood. So it's not fleeting. You really don't feel yourself. You feel bad about everything. You feel bad about yourself and how you're showing up. You may feel guilty or worthless. You may have kind of mania, so highs and extreme lows. Now, this is why I talk about the mental health warning at the beginning, because this is serious stuff. You may feel thoughts that are quite dark, or even think of suicide, or have thoughts of self-harm. So if these things are things that cross into your mind, please do share with somebody. Don't suffer in silence. And this is why it's really important for organizations specifically to really step into that duty of care, to provide this environment so that people can talk about this. I'm so privileged to work with organizations that are very forward thinking and provide that space for their people, that safe space for them to share. And oftentimes I'm the one that has those conversations and then navigates them and signposts them to the clinical sources of support. So as it says here, talk to your therapist or call your EAP line. So I'm just interested actually, how many people on the session today are aware of their own company's EAP? Do they know the number? Do they know it exists? Do they know that it's available generally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a week, 365 days a year, and that you can contact that without your bosses even knowing? A lot of people that I speak to have a reticence to contact the EAP because they feel that their managers will know about it. So it'd be interesting to see whether people can just pop in the chat window, whether they're aware of it and whether they know or would feel okay to contact it. Okay, moving on, please, Monica.
Can I just ask you a question, Shazmi?
Yeah,
so obviously everything you've just gone through, obviously we've been part of sort of the fight against COVID is the physical distancing and social distancing. So it's how do you sort of recognise that obviously there's that aspect of it where we're being encouraged not to get together as such, and sort of recognising the difference between that and someone actually purposefully avoiding engagement, because it's just trying to understand that dynamic of it as well.
So let me get the question right. So are you saying, how do we recognise in other people that either they're just wanting to adhere to the rules or they're depressed? Is that the question?
Yeah, that's the question I'm getting to. It's kind of trying to understand where the line is, because you want to engage with people, but it's trying to read their behaviour. And I think because all of our behaviour's changed, it's am I picking up on the right signals essentially?
It is. And I think it's about just being a good human and just being there for people, picking up the phone to your friends, to your colleagues. And this probably is something that you wouldn't have done before. So it's new behaviours, it's being that friend without being judgmental, but just saying, oh, I'm just checking in, see how you're doing. And then kind of building that relationship with someone, hopefully, to allow them that safe space. So that's what I do in my role, for example, whether it be coaching of people from a life coaching perspective or mental health advocacy work. I create that space. I hold space for people. I listen. So maybe the thing is for us just to listen or to seek to understand and just ask the question, how are you doing? Ask people, how are they doing? Whether it be a friend, a colleague, if it's a manager asking their teams, how are you doing? So invite that conversation. But it's a valid question, Monica, because behaviours are changing, especially with regard to the rules of 6, and they change all the time, not being able to interact with other people. So I think, it's interesting because at the beginning of lockdown, we all felt physically isolated because we were. Yet we're more connected now because of technology than we ever have been in history. So I guess it's going old school, but using technology. Message people, leave them a voice note, do Zooms, do Teams, Microsoft Team meetings, so you can see people, engage people's body language. You can see whether someone's low, you can see whether someone's not engaged, and then follow it up with the human conversation. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, if we could move on to the next slide if there are no questions. Thanks, Monica. So this really is about the steps that leaders can take to promote workplace wellness. So as I alluded to at the beginning, 1 in 6 people are suffering from a mental health condition such as anxiety, stress, depression. And really, if you're a strong leader, it's really imperative that you allow your staff to show up authentically, to express how they're feeling, to have avenues of support so that they can be open and honest. And there's no stigma around sharing whether they're feeling low or feeling depressed or going through something particularly challenging. The thing with this is that it reduces the presenteeism and absenteeism that we see at the moment, and also allows leaders to honour that duty of care and to be really inclusive employers and employees. So these are some things. So I know there's a lot on the slide, but we'll just go through them. It's about offering flexible working, which fosters trust and balance. So a lot of people who have had children, for example, over the past few months, not so much now because children are back at school, They needed to homeschool. They needed to navigate their day job as well as having tiny people to teach. So if you have an organization that really fosters that flexible working and doesn't micromanage and watch people over their shoulder, but builds that trust that, you know what, we've got high performing people, they will do their job, but we respect that they've got children and other responsibilities, and especially now, potentially caring responsibilities for ones who are ill from COVID. The other thing is, which I find really important, is promoting well-being and encouraging this honest dialogue around mental health. That's what my role is when I go into organisations, to ask the question about what the culture is. What is your culture with regard to mental health? Do you as leaders share with your team members and your staff whether you've had a mental health challenge? Do you talk about your journey? You know, raising mental health awareness, really having it not just as a KPI or as a checkbox exercise, but really embedding it in the fibre of what you do as an organisation. Mental well-being is vital. We all have physical health, so raise the conversation and the awareness and the training to your teams, especially managers, around this conversation. So encouraging a good work-life balance as well, you know, that's really important. Oh, say my internet's unstable, sorry. Promoting social activities, you know, what's really been quite powerful during the lockdown, and I've seen really successful organisations doing this well, is to have Zooms, to have a team social on a Friday, to build that esprit de corps. We are in a new paradigm, so having to be away from our team members has been quite strange and quite unsettling. Something that I'm very passionate about is focus groups. So some of the organisations that I work with have different focus groups. So it could be focus on autism, focus on mental health, focus on neurodiverse conditions such as dyspraxia or dyslexia. You know, have these things that are really catered around providing an inclusive and diverse environment. Also, as managers and leaders, it's really important for them to understand the reasons why mental ill health is happening. Is it because your environment is one that is not conducive to people showing up as being really well? You know, are you creating pressure on your teams? Are you causing them to feel that they can't talk? Is there excess pressure to complete the jobs of 3 people? You know, what are your cultures like? What are the things that are potentially causing stress for your individuals? This is vital. Take a look at your organizational culture. Communication is also important, you know, having regular one-to-ones with your staff. Not just about appraisals in terms of, you know, performance achievements and things like that, but just have that conversation. How are you doing? There will be reticence at first, especially if this is new to your philosophy or your culture as an organisation, but it is really important. You know, this will promote a healthy workplace mentally. And these one-to-ones can still take place even though you're not physically all in the office. It can be a matter of just scheduling it in and planning it. Something that's really important as well is having mentally aware supervisors. So making sure that each manager has mental health awareness training. You know, embed it into your induction packs, embed it into your training of management so that they can deal with people. Unfortunately, I have had experiences where I've dealt with individual clients who have really not had very good experiences with regard to the support they've had from their management, because the managers haven't understood mental health, or mental ill health rather, and they've really been on the receiving end of some pretty poor behaviours and treatment. Have some policies around workplace adjustments and phased returns to work. It's so surprising to see that sometimes the phased returns are not managed very well. So what's your policy like if you are in an organisation? Or if you are returning to work, feedback and know that you can use your voice and speak honestly about that. So those are some things. Those are some things that are really important for leaders to really embed in their day-to-day processes. Any questions, Monica? No. Fab. So if we can go into the next slide, please. We're now going to really look into ways in which we can embed some habits into our daily life so that you can show up not only as a sole individual, but show up if you work for an organization and really affect everybody else there as well. You can create that domino effect. The 3 steps are awareness, focus, and action, or awareness, acceptance, and action, as I've mentioned before. There's a couple of things on here, and we're going to talk about them. My ethos, as I mentioned, for equanimity is aligned intentional living. So set some intentions about who do you want to be every day? How do you want to feel? But really tap into your emotions. Really think about that. Think about that again without judgment, but just be honest with yourself. When we do create these healthy habits, it creates a shift in our mindset, and it allows us to then influence not only our own work environment, but the workplace culture that we show up to as well. So something that I encourage people to look at, if you were to write the word pies on a piece of paper, P-I-E-S, on a, what do you call it? The bottom image, yeah, it says self-compassion. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. It's a bit blurry. If you were to write the word pies on a piece of paper vertically, this really is important. And I want you to take care of your pies. P is physical. So every day, do something that's going to affect your physical. I is intellectual. E is emotional. And S is spiritual. So when we take care of our pies, and I'm not talking about the pies with the pastry on them, we can really support our mental well-being. And do something every single day that's going to allow you to really take care of your physical side, your intellectual, your emotional, and your spiritual. The quote at the bottom, or the little stick person at the bottom, says self-compassion, and it's got self-kindness, mindfulness, and common humanity. Now, I'm a big advocate in self-compassion. I teach all of my coaching clients to embrace this as a tool for success. When you're kind to yourself, and it's not just about self-care routines like having a bubble bath, it's about the way you think about yourself, the people you surround yourself with, the thoughts that you have. This leads to a habit of being really open and honest, you know. When you have that positivity, it really helps you. It helps you to really process those thoughts that go through your head. I don't know whether anyone knows how many thoughts we have every single day. Might be interesting to see if anyone could put it in the chat window, how many thoughts we have every single day. It might be good to have a little, should have put a poll here actually, Monica, now I come to think of it. Any ideas? How many thousands of thoughts do you think we have every single day? 2,500, okay, that's a good guess. Anybody else? Well over 1,000, 20,000, I think that says. I can't see all the notes.
I'm going to go higher and say 50,000.
Oh, we've got a winner in the house. Any advance on 50? Right, 60,000. Oh, we're getting closer. We're getting warmer. So I'm going to end your misery. We have over 70,000 thoughts a day. Over 70,000. So there are going to be some of those thoughts that are going to be a bit negative. Now, I'm not asking you to process every single one of those thoughts. Did you know that, for example, your subconscious mind, the subconscious part of us that runs the show, processes 400,000 bits of information per second at a speed of 100,000 miles an hour? That's the subconscious part of our brain. The conscious part of our brain only processes 100,000 bits of information per second at a speed of 100 miles an hour. So our subconscious brain, which is having 70,000 thoughts, is processing these 400,000 bits of information every single second. So if your self-talk is quite negative and tells you that you're not good enough, tells you that things are going to not work out in your best good, you can see how that can have an impact on your mental wellness. It can make you feel low self-esteem, that you're not worthy, that you're not good enough. So having an awareness of your self-talk is really important. Wayne Dyer, the late Wayne Dyer, said, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So if you are in a really low energy, in a funk, so to speak, just have a moment to just sit and see if you change your perspective on it. Think about how you can just shift from the negative thought to the more positive thought. And we'll talk a bit more about this in a little while. But these are just some things that we can do. And then the one with the hands on the table is really support, reaching out to people who have your back. You are the average of 5 people that you hang around with. So who are the people who you're hanging around with? Obviously, at the moment, there aren't that many because we're not allowed to. But in terms of who do you speak to? Who do you connect with, especially virtually? Are they supporting your mental well-being, or are they bringing you down? Are they rocket booster friends that make you stand on your tiptoes, or are they pulling you down? So these are just some things to think of, especially in terms of awareness and habits. Choose who you want to associate with, choose your thoughts. And I'm not saying to push away all the thoughts that pop in that are negative, but just to be aware of them, to process them, to question them, to challenge them. And of course, self-compassion is about being kind to yourself, honoring your feelings and emotions, being honest about how you're feeling. If low mood or depression is your reality right now, accept that, but make a decision to get some help. There's no shame. Any questions before we move on to the next slide, Monica, please? I can see one on the Q&A.
There's a question just about if you're happy to share a copy of your slides.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we'll get those sent out to everybody. That's not a problem.
Yeah, definitely. I was just reading that myself. Fabulous. If we could move to the next slide, please, Monica. Fabulous. So this is something I live and breathe by, and I've been doing this for probably about 5 years now, by really honing in my morning routine. And I encourage everyone on the call to think about their morning routine. The energy and clarity you create in the morning sets the tone for your day, and it has an impact on your mental health. So when I've been at my lowest and really not felt like getting up, I've really thought about my morning routine. And that sounds a little bit paradoxical because, if you're thinking about feeling low, you don't really tend to think about morning routine. But as I said, the energy and clarity you create in the morning sets the tone for the day. So there's a great book called The Miracle Morning that Hal Elrod wrote, and he introduced me to this concept of savers. Some of you on the call may have been aware of this, you may be doing it, but for those of you that don't know what savers are, as you can see on the slide, the S is for silence, A is for affirmation, V is for visualization, E exercise, R reading, S scribing or journaling. So set some time in the morning to do this. So it might be that you get up an hour early or half an hour earlier. You may not do this in an hour. You may have a short 30 minutes. Tony Robbins has a power 30 minutes. But when you start to do this, this will affect your mental health because you are starting the day with intention. You're starting your morning with purpose. You're sitting in silence. You're listening and connecting to your energy. You're listening to your emotions. How am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? It's challenging that, and without confrontation, of course, and judgment, but through a lens of possibility and optimism and joy. So really sit with that, connect in that silence. Affirmation is when you state positive statements that begin with I am. So it could be, I am worthy, I am peaceful, I am capable. Things of that nature. You choose the I am. And what happens with that is that it positively reinforces that message. So even though you might not necessarily be feeling it, if you keep repeating that, your brain or the reticular activating system in your brain will start to recognize that as truth. So that can shift your mindset and your mental well-being from a low space to a higher space if you do it with repetition and incorporate this as a habit. The visualization one is you really just sitting there and just imagining your day, or going into the shower and just imagining, right, I've got this meeting today and then that meeting. I really imagine that meeting is going to go really well. I'm going to deliver that report and it's going to be well received. This is powerful. It allows you to dream, and it allows you to connect with the best version of you that knows that this can all happen perfectly if you set that intention. Exercise doesn't have to be, a hugely high energy kind of workout. Move your body. Motion creates emotion. And this is so powerful. When you move your body, you tap into emotion. So do that. Make a commitment to doing that every single day. Reading. So read something that's really uplifting and encouraging. Read something that's probably intellectually stimulating. Do you remember the PIES, the intellectual part of that PIES acronym? And then scribing. So this is journaling. Journaling is so powerful, and I encourage all of my clients, whether they're my coaching clients or my mental health clients, to record their feelings. It's not a dear diary. Journaling is more of asking a question so that subconscious part of your brain can extract the answer. So this is how to win the day. So when we change the way that we move, we change the pattern of our language, we change the pattern of our belief and our focus, we can really embed these practices that will make us feel more mentally healthy and affect the way that we show up. So let's move to the next slide, Monica, if there are no questions on this one. Thank you. So we're going to talk about some practical things. During lockdown, some of us have possibly developed some unhealthy behaviours. And again, there's no judgment when I say that. But this is a reminder. This is how we can create a mentally healthy workplace or environment, by doing these things, practicing and committing these things. So hydration is so important. Our body is made up of 70% water. So when we drink water, we really allow our body to get everything that it needs. The rest of it can come from food. So those are kind of the recommended daily amounts for men and women. Again, avoid caffeine, because that is a depressant that can affect your mood, it affects your sleep. Alcohol makes you dehydrated. We mentioned a few slides back that, some people, and there's no judgment here again, have perhaps used alcohol as a reward during the lockdown, let's have a glass of wine, which then turns to a bottle of wine. And this can affect your mood and your mental well-being. And also the amount of sugar you drink. If you're drinking highly carbonated drinks, that's not going to impact your mental health positively either. So hydration, that's one of the slides that's really, a reminder. Next slide, please, Monica. So this is a combination of movement. I've talked about motion creating emotion. Stretch, do yoga, meditate, move your body. Think about the food you're eating. Prepare in bulk so that you don't have to worry about it. Prepare on a Sunday, so you've got little boxes or Tupperware boxes. Who remembers Tupperware boxes? Or plastic containers of food that you've got for the week to relieve the burden. If you're working from home especially, you don't really want to be thinking about the meals. So make some healthy choices. This will alleviate any stress and any overwhelm, and allow you really to be efficient and to have this healthy working environment, especially, as I've mentioned, if your home environment is now your working space. So something we noticed at the beginning of lockdown, everyone was doing Joe Wicks, or a lot of people were. So learn a new exercise regime. We know that when we move and exercise, the body responds and releases the happy hormones, endorphins. So this can help you really feel good. Go outside for a walk at lunchtime, schedule it into your calendar. Encourage your teams to have a full lunch break, where they can have walking meetings, or not even to work, but just to have exercise as a healthy option. So limit the amount of times you go to the kitchen. I had so many of my clients say to me at the beginning of lockdown, and even during the middle, Shazna, I keep going to the fridge because I'm at home, I'm bored, I'm losing interest in my work. This can affect your mental well-being, because obviously you keep going to the fridge, you put weight on, you feel remorseful at snacking. So try and think of some kind of reward system that doesn't involve food. Think of something that allows you to exercise that self-control and make an intention, that today I'm going to honor my body and be healthy, because I know that that's going to affect my mental well-being and affect the way that I work. I'm going to feel satisfied. I'm really going to operate in the best version of me. Something that's really important as well is to be mindful when you're eating. Have some healthy snacks, graze on them rather than having big portions of food. And have an accountability partner. Accountability buddies are the best thing ever. I'm an accountability partner for hundreds of people. And knowing that you have that accountability partner is really powerful, because it allows you to celebrate your wins. It allows you to also encourage your accountability buddy. Accountability is the glue that bonds commitment to success and commitment to results. So by being honest and saying, look, I'm struggling with this, or being honest with someone in your team or even your manager by saying, look, please, can you hold me accountable? That will help you and help you to be more mentally healthy. The key thing on this slide as well is about not expecting too much. These are uncertain times, but just make small steps, commit to make one small step. One of my mantras is one step at a time is enough for me. So on to the next slide, please, Monica. Fabulous. So this is just a summary of how we can help ourselves and how you can support others. And you can practice self-care, that's helping you so that you can then show up to others more abundantly. If you're a manager, if you practice what you preach, lead by example, you can also encourage and foster that mentality in your teams. Be available to other people. As Monica asked that question before, it's really about just being a good human. Be kind, reach out to people, ask them how they're doing, but do it with authenticity, really care about it, so that then they will reciprocate, and you can really create that healthy environment. Exercise boundaries around food and alcohol. We've talked about that already. Check in on people, monitor your own stress levels, be honest, honest conversation, courageous conversation around mental health is so important. When I was in my lowest of days, I really wish that I'd had the courage back then to, rather than letting it get on top of me, just to be honest and say, look, I need a bit of help. There's no shame in vulnerability. So be that person that can be there to listen, but also give yourself permission to ask for help as well. Some other things on here: commit to nurturing your body, mind, and spirit. If meditation is your thing, it certainly is mine. It helped me. I help people to meditate every single day. If mindfulness is your thing, if exercise is your thing, if walking is your thing, if reading is your thing, it helps you to be mentally healthy. Find your thing. Be a good listener, I've already talked about, and offer practical help. It could be things that you could do to help someone in your team or someone who you manage. If you're a leader, help them practically, offer that help. Over to the next slide, please, Monica. So we're just going to touch on this one. So growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Our mindset is the way that we view the world. It's our personal philosophy. And I kind of alluded to it before, that it's really important to have that positive mindset. And it's not just having a false view of the world. It's choosing, am I in a growth mindset right now, or am I in a fixed mindset? And there's a distinction between the two. The fixed mindset is very static, very limited. It looks at feedback as criticism. It doesn't look at other people's successes and see that as something to be celebrating, but instead sees that as a threat. Whereas a growth mindset is very freeing. It embraces feedback. It embraces failure, in inverted commas. It sees it as an opportunity for growth. What I've noticed throughout the pandemic is that a lot of my clients at first saw this as catastrophic, which it has been, but were then able to reframe that, to adapt and adjust, to offer their services online, to be more present, to be better leaders, to really be more human, to listen, to observe, to think outside of the box, to get off the rat race, to get off that treadmill. That's a growth mindset. That's seeing things differently, wanting to learn, building skills. It's really about thriving on challenge, really, and seeing that as an opportunity. So I want you to think about this. And when you have the slides yourself, just look and think, well, the way that I'm acting at the moment, is that me showing up in a growth mindset or a fixed mindset? Because when you've got a balance between positive and negative thoughts and emotions, you can really persevere and thrive. My intention as a coach, as a mental health advocate, as a person who sat here before you, as a thought leader, is to invite you to really choose your mindset, choose who you want to be in terms of your approach to things, but to really be honest and open about that, and to really know that you can do these things and that there is possibility, even if perhaps your mental health is suffering right now. It's temporary and it's not always going to be that way. So this is food for thought. Monica, if you could go to the next slide if we have no questions. Thank you. That'd be great. So these are some real avenues of support, and I've kind of alluded to them before. Some of you were kind enough to say in the chat window that you did know what your EAP provision was. There are different ones, Bupa, AXA, lots of different companies that offer trained support. So if you find yourself in a situation where you might feel depressed, you might be having problems in your relationship because of, and that's a big one, a lot of people are living with people who prior to the pandemic weren't spending a lot of time with, and all of a sudden they're with them 24 hours a day, and it's highlighted cracks in the relationship. You can speak to an EAP provider about that, relationship, money, finances, physical health, emotional health. You can talk to them. So please do, I can't emphasize enough, reach out to them. Speak to your occupational health team, your HR team, your mental health allies. The organisation that I was mentioning that I work with at the moment, they've got about 2,000 mental health allies within their organisation who are all mentally health trained, all mental health first aiders. So people come to me, and then I signpost them onto the mental health first aiders, should they need that, continued one-to-one support, because there's only one of me and thousands of them. So speak to your first aiders, become a mental health first aider, end the stigma. We all have a responsibility to create these mentally healthy workplaces. I am so passionate about this that I set up my business in this field, because I know that mental health is so vitally important. Speak to your doctor. It might be that they recommend CBT, they might recommend a holistic approach in terms of a course or some kind of cognitive behavior therapy, or it might be that they go down a medicinal route. But work out what's right for you. Don't listen to people who perhaps haven't had the same experience as you, but really be open to what's right for you. Speak to a trusted friend. Speak to someone who you can really take into your confidence. Speak to your line manager. Hopefully, your line manager will have a awareness around mental well-being. And if you're a small business, you can speak to the Health for Work advice line service that's been provided by the NHS Occupational Health Services as well. You can speak to Mind, you can speak to Samaritans. So there's lots of avenues of support. In summary, we've looked at what challenges the pandemic and COVID-19 has brought around for us as a population. We've looked at how that's affected our mental health. We've looked at ways to identify low mood. We've looked at ways to identify depression. We've looked at the steps that leaders can take in terms of promoting a healthy, inclusive environment for their staff, workplace balance and work-life balance, looking at the causes of workplace stress, really being that conduit and that safe space, training their staff. So what part can you play? Just see where you're at. What's your current reality? What help do you need? And ask for that help. Be the change that you want to be, that you want to see. Ask for what you need. Monica, I think you have another polling question or two for us. So if you could put those up as well right now, but I'd really be interested to hear what your thoughts are. And the question is this: do you now feel more willing to share how you are feeling from a mental health perspective now that you've attended this webinar? And again, be honest and open. It will really help us to gauge the effectiveness of sessions like this. Monica and myself have known each other for many years, and our aligned intention is to provide you with the tools to really help you to thrive and not merely survive. This is uncertain times for us, but we can navigate it through openness and through action. Monica.
Thanks, Shasni. Thanks. I've just realised we've got about a minute left. So are you happy to stay on for another minute or two? And maybe if someone does have a quick question, we can take it, because obviously we want to respect everybody's time as well, and appreciate that you may need to go because we're right up at the end.
Yes, go
so
ahead.
yeah. Sorry, I'll end this poll and then I'll launch the final poll for you.
So it's, do you feel more informed and aware of the avenues of support available for you should you need to discuss your mental well-being in the workplace? Yes, no, somewhat more informed, significantly informed. So we appreciate your feedback on that. Thanks, everyone. Happy to take any questions. I'm aware that it is 1 o'clock. I could talk for hours. Timing's not my forte. Thank you. But you can reach out to myself and Monica.
And what we'll do is we'll put your contact information sort of into the pack that we send out afterwards if people have got follow-up questions. So there will be an avenue for that, because we do appreciate how busy everybody is and you may need to drop off now. But let me just end this poll as well. But thank you so much, Shasni. That was so much food for thought, and there's some practical things that we can all do as well. And thank you everyone for participating and joining us in today's discussion as well.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.